Good morning. Well, I've tried to go to sleep, but that wasn't working, so I thought I'd get up and share my thoughts with you, my tribe. I had an event yesterday that kind of was a wake-up call for me. It changed my perception of myself and my reality. Now, I didn't take any mind-bending narcotics. How can I put this? I'm struggling with it myself, so it's very unusual that I'm lost for words, isn't it? But for the last few months, a lot of people, and in a few particular cases, quite rightly so, have seen me as a threat, either to their position or their physical and mental well-being. Yeah, I accept that. I went down to Ipswich Community Hub, very welcoming place. Chatting with my buddies, getting rather over enthusiastic about passing 100 subscribers. Once again, thank you. And I received a phone call from local social services to say that it had been reported to them that I was a vulnerable person who may be being exploited. And I mulled that over. I explained the situation and how I perceived it and how I was breaking contact with them, the specified person, and I can't really go into details, obviously, and I was coping with it. And I'd taken advice from friends and my partner and agreed that this was the best resolution to the situation. And then I went about my day, walked down to Ipswich waterfront, passed the time of day with some more friends, came back home, and I mulled it over some more. And it suddenly struck me the paradoxical nature of being viewed as simultaneously a threat in some circles and vulnerable in others. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think for a lot of years, because I wear my heart on my sleeve, I'm quite empathic and sensitive. When people tell me something, I take it at face value. So if they say something nasty, spiteful, mean and hurtful, it really, really hurts. Consequently, if someone compliments me in some way, I can sometimes read too much into it and get far too bouncy and happy and overconfident about it. And this, over the years, has led to me in spaces where I don't feel completely safe to develop a very don't fuck with me mentality. I will show the fact very provocatively that I am not someone to be messed with. And for quite a while, people thought this was an act. And then at various points over the past couple of years, especially, people have begun to realise it is not an act. People hurt me, I retaliate in a spectacular fashion. Because it's kind of, I mean, I haven't seen the inside of a prison cell in nearly 30 years. And I never intend to go back there. And my experience in prison was actually, in a way, far more comfortable and pleasant than a lot of my real life has been. I was only on remand for 3 months. I think it was about that. I don't know. Time, there's a different perception of time in there. But somehow, despite the fact my time was actually okay, I didn't feel threatened. This was because I was on the medical wing. So individual cells, many of the people who were there were either far too old to be a threat or were closely supervised. It was like a cross between a prison, a psychiatric ward, and a care home, really. I should think the system has deteriorated vastly in the last 30 years, which is another reason why I would never want to get myself back into that situation. From what I know of the state of the UK prison system, it's atrocious. And I have that prison yard mentality. Whereas if I feel people are seeking to do me harm emotionally or physically, I strike. Or at least I demonstrate that that would not be a good idea. Very dramatically, normally. Which means I am prone to over-the-top behaviours. Certainly within the last year, I have learnt that sometimes just walking away instead of demonstrating, not saying anything and walking away is the better and more grown up and mature and responsible way of handling these things. But the paradox of being seen as this is, I'll come back to the paradox of being seen as a threat in some circles and vulnerable in another. And maybe in the middle somewhere is the reasons for some of my over-the-top behaviours. It's a lot to think about and a lot to take in, I feel. And then I started thinking about, well, how did I end up in this vulnerable position where someone borderline was taking advantage? Because although by that certain person, I completely cleared their back garden for them, their actual back garden, before anybody thinks otherwise. I unblocked a sink, and I was basically doing various other tasks, and I wasn't paid for this. So you can see why people thought I was being exploited. I mean, from my perception, I was enjoying, because my partner's big into her own DIY. She's a very tough, independent woman. She, especially if she's about, likes to do the DIY herself and doesn't like me interfering. This other person was letting me do all the manly man stuff. Gardening, unblocking sinks, barbecuing. So from my perspective, I was having a whale of a time. But when you get the perspectives of other people on the situation, you suddenly stop and think. And then you analyse why. And the reason? I have this year lost connection after connection after connection with people I thought I either loved or trusted or both. Some of it has been simply because that person has passed away. Some of it because that person has broken contact with me for various reasons. Some of it because I've been forced out of social situations due to power struggles, personal dislikes, bigotry, possibly. I don't know. I don't pretend to question people's I do not understand the motivations of some people. I can make educated guesses, but I try not to speculate on this channel. I try to speak only what I know to be true. So I won't get into the ins and outs of these various situations. I'm just going to talk generally about them. I was so proud of being in the reenactment group. The last group I was in, which I was with for a number of years, I felt comfortable within myself. I felt comfortable in the company, in a large mixed company of men and women. I didn't feel any need to prove myself in any way apart from combat display, obviously, not full on. The exercise did me good. The company was brilliant. The living history side of it at the events we did at Weststow Anglo-Saxon Village, where we lived in these thatched and wattle and daub small homes with a fire pit in the middle, cooked and ate as they would have done in roughly the 6th, 7th and 8th centuries, maybe even 9th in some circumstances. It was my little version of paradise. Walking around at reenactment events with an axe and knife in my belt, mingling with American Civil War soldiers, Greek hoplites, Roman centurions, Napoleonic officers, multi-period events I'm talking, not the small ones we did ourselves. It felt like the most natural thing in the world to me. I remember at one multi-period event, there was an Asda nearby and the bar was rather expensive. So half a dozen of us of various mixed historical times without weapons wandered over there. So round about tea time in a bustling town, a quite packed out Asda was treated to a bunch of historical warriors and ladies strolling around their aisles like they didn't have a care in the world. It was a magic moment. That time gave me some of the fondest memories of life that I've had thus far. And when I got the opportunity to start this up again, I toyed around with 2 of the bigger local groups. I didn't quite gel with either of them. They were both groups with nice people in them. But one was difficult to get to because of my lack of transport. The other, I think perhaps I had a sense there were issues that needed to be resolved. And I've since heard that was the case. I have no idea whether they have been resolved. None of my business. And for a while, all of the reenactment group felt good. I felt confident. I felt like I was valued. I felt I had a place. I felt a sense of belonging. So when an incident where one individual who I thought was a trusted friend turned on me verbally, and then got verbally aggressive with me, and I got verbally aggressive back, and then there was a misunderstanding and I was barred from a certain establishment, I didn't feel it much. I thought, and then, to be honest, the signs that things weren't quite right were there all along with the reenactment group. Then the power struggle erupted and I get ejected, and then through someone's lies I get ejected from another place, and then I get ejected from the group and everything goes to shit. So I lost, in quick succession, 3 places where I used to feel safe, 2 drinking establishments and the training hall. Well, the group to me is as much a place as it is a social group. I lost my trust in quite a lot of individuals connected with these 3 things. And so I started desperately flailing around for another connection, another safe space, another place I could belong. So yes, I was and am vulnerable. And accepting that you're vulnerable is a difficult thing to do, especially for a man. We're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're supposed to be big and, that nothing touches us. My father had a great deal of problem expressing any form of emotional vulnerability. I am luckier than most in that I have a very understanding partner and feel safe enough to admit my vulnerabilities to her. And she knows them. She doesn't need telling. Psychiatric nurse. Yeah. Do I feel weak because I'm vulnerable? No. I feel confused. Too many people associate vulnerability with weakness. Too many people will seize on a vulnerability and use it to their advantage. And this is when I get at my most angry. When either I see someone taking advantage of someone's vulnerabilities or someone takes advantage of my vulnerabilities. I am very aware also of when it can be perceived that I am taking advantage of vulnerable people. And I've pulled back from a couple of situations during this period with people outside and unconnected to the general palaver that's been going on. Chaos, whatever you want to call it. Because I do not want to find myself in a position where I'm exploiting another person's vulnerabilities in order to fulfill my own needs. Well, that's a concept and a half to grasp. Deep thoughts, they usually come, very early in the morning when you can't sleep, don't they? Yeah. Destructive thoughts as well, I found in the past. It's a confusing concept. And I think a lot of the qualities that can be perceived as vulnerable, open-hearted, generous, helpful. No, you know, these helping people, cheering people up. Being there when people need me, it gives me a dopamine hit, makes me feel good. So my motivations are not entirely selfish. No, I'm not entirely unselfish. Yes, because apparently, if you're generous, giving, and helpful, and you're there for people to protect them when they need you, you're selfish. Yeah, that does seem to be a concept that gets twisted around a lot, actually, isn't it? The difference is when people feel grateful and repay you, you don't take advantage of their return generosity. You don't take more than you have given. And I think this was the issue with this situation involving social services. This person was starting to take a lot more from me than they were giving to me. And they were starting to offer ways of repayment that I didn't really want. This person was the right sex, by the way. I'm not that vulnerable. Luckily, just not really my type of woman. I won't go into details, but oof, no. But I was feeling desperate for a connection at the time, so and that's why another reason I have removed myself from the situation, because I knew I was vulnerable to something that would have been very hurtful to my partner. I don't know. In a future video, not in this one because I've rambled on for quite a while, I am going to be discussing a proposal to you, my subscribers, from which financially I will not benefit personally. Let's get that straight. But may well, as you guys seem to massively appreciate my content, hopefully expand the reach of my channel through you, my subscribers. I'll leave you hanging there, and hopefully at some point tomorrow, maybe Monday, I will float this concept with you, ladies, gentlemen, and other human beings. So we'll leave it at that. Watch this space. You'll know more soon, as soon as I've figured out all the precise details. Ciao.